guys ready?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Pass me your glass. There you go.
Hi, that was very loud. So much louder than I imagined it would be. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Chymera. I'm Emma Collins. I'm the director of Push the Boat Out, Edinburgh's International Poetry Festival, and I was delighted to be invited here today with AY Chao, Cameron Johnston, and James Logan for an event where we will be discussing their latest novels and the chaotic capers within them. It is incredibly hot in here, so thank you very much for bearing with us. And hello also to the people who are joining us on the live stream. I'm going to introduce each author in a second and ask them to tell you a little bit about their book. But before we do that, I just want to let you know how the event's going to go. So it's going to be about 55 minutes long. We'll be sure to leave some time for your questions at the end. So do have a think about what you'd like to ask our panel today. And then afterwards, there's going to be a signing, and we would love you to join us for that. So, we'll show you where that is after the event. So, first of all, please join me in welcoming AY Chao. Alice is a Chinese-Canadian author of fantasy. She is fascinated by the interplay between the self-perceived and imposed identity and how this intersects with belonging. A recovering lawyer and, I wish I'd asked how to pronounce this, Zhao, thank you, food, dumpling enthusiast, we're all dumpling enthusiasts, surely. She's a #1 Sunday Times best-selling author of Shanghai Immortal, and we're delighted to have her here today to discuss the second book in that trilogy, Paris Celestial. So would you mind telling us a little bit about that book and letting those of us who might not have read it know a bit more about it, please?
Okay, so is the mic on? Can you hear me? Y'all can hear me? No, you can't hear me. Mic's not on. 1 second. Oh, sorry. I can speak really loud. Okay. Yeah? Oh, it's working now. Excellent. So Shanghai Immortal is the first in the duology and, well, first in the series, and Paris Celestial is the second. In Shanghai Immortal, a half Huli Jing, half fox spirit, very chaos demon, grapples with her position in the world. She doesn't really fit in any world. In Shanghai Immortal, she kind of finds friends. She deals with her maternal side, which is the Huli Jing side. And in Paris Celestial, she discovers her vampire side. So she goes to Paris and meets her French vampire family. And again, she has to deal with, a lot of family issues that most people will relate with, loyalty to family, loyalty to friends, and trying to juggle all those things while still remaining true to yourself. And it's also historical. So it's set in 1930s. First one's the 1930s Shanghai, and this one's 1930s Paris. So the historical research was a lot of fun.
It's brilliant. Definitely read it.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much. And then I would like to introduce you to James Logan. James was born in the southeast of England and grew up on a steady diet of 80s cartoons, fighting fantasy books, and Commodore 64 games, which sounds brilliant, and which forged a love of all things fantastical. His first novel, The Silver Blood Promise, was longlisted for the Goldsboro 2025 Glass Bell Awards and translated into multiple languages. And the second book in the quartet, The Blackfire Blade, has recently come out, and we're delighted to be chatting to him about it today. Would you mind sharing a little bit about the book and the setting and telling those of us who haven't read it something?
Yeah, for sure. Sorry. So Blackfire Blade is the second novel in the last Legacy series that follows on from The Silver Blood Promise. And I think the series has been described as Lies of Locke Lamora meets Indiana Jones, which I think sums it up pretty well. It follows a lapsed aristocrat called Lucan Gardova who has fallen out with his dad. He's been kicked out of his university after a duel went wrong, and he's made a bit of a mess of his life, and he's playing too many card games, he's drinking too much, and trying to figure out how does he get back the life that he has thrown away. And then his father, estranged father, dies in mysterious circumstances, which leads him to investigate his father's death. It's obviously too late now for him to kind of make amends for their fallout, but maybe he can find out the mystery behind who murdered his father and seek some kind of justice. And that in turn leads him into a web of intrigue that extends far further than he could have imagined across different cities. And the more he investigates it, the more he finds himself embroiled in a big kind of conspiracy. The series is really my love letter to kind of action, adventure, fantasy. So it's got sword fights, it's got magic and monsters, and witty sidekicks and snark and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, chaos and capers basically.
Chaos and Capers, amazing, great, thank you. And then finally, Cameron Johnston is the British Fantasy Award and Dragon Awards nominated author of dark fantasy novels, The Traitor God, God of Broken Things, The Maleficent Seven, and The Last Shield. He is a swordsman, a gamer, and an enthusiast of archaeology, history, and mythology. And he's here to discuss his latest novel, First Mage on the Moon. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
I think mine's gone. Yeah, so this is set in a Cold War between two great empires. And the research and design mages of one of them decide they're fed up with building weapons of mass destruction. So they're going to embezzle all the funds and war materials, and they're going to try and build a rocket to the moon, which is where their gods live. So they're going to go up there, if they can, and ask them why they're allowing this war to continue, and can they please stop it right now? Thank you very much. So it's all about science. If you didn't have science, all you had was magic, and how you describe like gravity and orbital mechanics, and how you build a rocket and not die. So there's lots of trial and error and trying to come up with science when all you've got is mysticism.
Thank you very much. So all three books are very different in terms of plot, but I think they share a kind of commonality in that they are exciting adventures where lots of things go wrong. And I kind of wanted to start there. So this panel is called Chaotic Capers, but your books contain very different kinds of chaos. When you started writing, what was the initial spark for each of your books? Was it a character, was it a world, or a mystery, or did you just want to throw someone into a spectacularly difficult situation? Does anybody want to start?
I know exactly how this book started. I was actually working on a prologue for a different book, and I wrote some lines, and I really liked the character in the lines. It was something it's like in the first paragraph of Shanghai Immortal. It's something like, you think with, what was it? Something along the lines of like, with a title like Lady Jing of blah, 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 you'd think I'd be all hair, tatas, and ass, but actually I'm a degenerate something, and I really loved the idea of this noble lady who absolutely refuses to be noble or feminine or, fit into any of those molds. And she was just kind of like an angry little troll. And I really liked that. So I was like, oh, maybe I can make her like a fox spirit and really delve into, like, Shanghai Immortal and Paris Celestial are a mashup, like Marie Kondoing, all the things that I loved growing up, like the 1980s, 1990s Hong Kong cinema, Chinese folklore, and Canadian humor, SNL, Saturday Night Live, and just mashing it all together and putting it in a book. So that's how that came about.
Thanks so much. James, what about you?
Yeah, I think it was similar. I think I just had a lot of things rattling around in my head that had been in there for a long time that I just wanted to put into it. But I think the starting point, was I wanted to write something that I knew I would be able to explore different settings with that wouldn't be just limited to one setting. I had a friend who wrote a quartet of novels quite a few years ago now, actually, and they're all set in a kind of a world where an ice age is encroaching. And I remember speaking to him about it, and by the time he was writing book 4, he was like, "Oh, mate, there's only so many ways you can describe snow. I'm kind of bored of it now." And that sort of stuck in my head, and I just thought, I don't want to be locked in. I think the worst thing that can happen to a writer is to get bored of what you're doing, because if you're bored, it'll show in the work, and the reader can tell that you weren't really feeling it. And I think that's one of the worst things that can happen. So I wanted to not lose interest in my own work, and I think I'm someone that loses interest in things quite easily. So it was a way of keeping myself engaged. So I just thought, I need a story that will take me to different places. So that's where the idea came from. Like, I'll start off in this city, and then there'll be something that happens that takes them somewhere else, and then somewhere else, and just explores these different regions of the same world. So really that was the starting point, and I think the kind of story I ended up writing, which is like a sort of action-adventure, low fantasy, kind of grimy, they're kind of almost like the opposite of the big epic fantasies I grew up reading. That was the kind of story I think that best suited that sort of template for what I wanted to do. So I think that's really the starting point for me.
Thank you. And what about you, Cameron? Because this is quite different than your other books, isn't it?
It is. I mean, essentially, I'm a big old geek. I love fantasy. I love space travel. I love engineering, science, weird alchemy, weird facts you fall down when you research anything as a writer and spend far too much time on and then not include it in the books. So I was sitting thinking, I read a lot of fantasy, but, wizards are a remarkably uncurious lot. It's all fireballs and demons, and it's never looking up at the sky and going, what is that big shiny thing up there? Maybe I should take a look at that. So that's sort of where that was born from. And then I thought, what if NASA were wizards? They kind of are. But, if they had magic and no science, how would they try and accomplish this thing? And how would they rationalize everything you need to do to get up into space? And, ancient peoples did know the moon moved, they knew the stars moved, they didn't know why, but they have to try and figure out the mathematics of it, which is interesting when you have to develop it from nothing. So essentially, this is me just exploring that whole concept for myself.
Thanks very much. And then in each case, chaos ensues. All the stories are amazing adventures, and in each one, it's sort of seemingly clear goals at the beginning, whether that's a diplomatic mission or weapon construction or opening a vault. And then these keep spiraling out of control in all kinds of unexpected ways, either by the characters' own decisions or events that they can't control. How do you keep escalating these things in new and interesting ways rather than just a bigger explosion, And how do you decide when enough is enough, it's time for resolution, we've put these characters through enough trials?
That's a tricky one.
Oh, thank you.
I think you start off with small explosions, and then you go, how could this possibly go worse? You're like, okay, a bigger explosion. Someone finds out what you're doing. How do you cover this up? And it all just naturally escalates and escalates while they're doing all of the cool stuff on the sidelines, trying to stop all the bad people finding out. So I definitely think there's ways around it, but you have to keep the tension up. And all the best discoveries come from mistakes anyway.
That's true.
Yeah, I think the chaos in the Silver Blood Promise, it kind of mirrors the sort of chaos that went into the actual writing of it, in the sense that I didn't really have a clue what I was doing. And even as someone who, as someone who's worked in publishing for a long time, albeit on the editorial side, it doesn't mean you actually have any idea how to write a book. You might know how to edit one, but you don't necessarily know how to write one. So I guess I was just making a lot of it up as I went along, and I sort of had an idea for the first third of the book, and I was like, right, I'll figure the rest out as I go. And funnily enough, I didn't, and then had to stop, and then had to figure out, take a break and figure it all out. So I don't know. I think it was just a case of thinking, what exciting, what is the most exciting stuff that I can do, and where does that lead? And then, it's almost like one of the things that I don't tend to read reviews, but you see the odd thing, and something that quite a few people have said about the books is that they have an almost video game-like kind of template in that there's sort of, they do this thing and then they have to go and do another thing and then do another thing, and some of them are kind of almost side quests off the main sort of plot, as it were. And I never thought about it like that, but given that I'm such a big gamer and have been from a very young age, it's almost inevitable that would inform the way that I went around it. So I don't know, it just sort of came together, and over multiple rewrites got to the point where it just kind of all held together, I suppose. I'd love to kind of claim that there was a more kind of intelligent way that I went about it, but it was just kind of throwing it all together and then doing it over and over again until it worked. That was the kind of the process, really. It was quite chaotic.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I definitely feel like a lot of it, like my zero draft is verbal diarrhea. It's literally like something that I write for myself to get the story down so that I have something to work with. And it becomes more nuanced and more layered with every draft, right? Because then I can look at it and be like, oh, this is a bit weird, this doesn't really work, the pacing's weird. But I really like stories which are like a noose, where you start with like a relatively open noose, and with every decision, that noose gets tighter and tighter and tighter. And I think that's just really fun. And in terms of like when do you know when to stop? I think like with this one, it's very much like more Kisho Tenketsu, which is like 4-act kind of structure, where the first 2 acts are where you get to know the character, and then the 3rd act is a twist. Something happens that's unexpected, and then it's like, oh my God, what are we doing? And then that's almost like the snowball effect, where the decision she's making is in like conflict with what somebody else wants, and it just spirals from there. And when you come to the point where it's like, okay, how do we like stab her and twist that knife? And like, at what point do you let it go? Like, that's like where the revelation is. What is the revelation she's gonna have at the end? How does she decide how to go on and be okay with whatever decision she's made? I mean, like, I think often it's the dark night of the soul or whatever in the 3-act structure. It's like the rock bottom. What is that rock bottom? And then how do they claw their way up? And I think that's really fun. I mean, I think we're all masochists in a way, or what is the other one? Sadists, where we're torturing other people. So we torture our readers. Yeah, a little bit like we torture ourselves by writing these things, like spend so much time by yourself in your head. And then you're like, how do I torture the reader? How do I make them hurt? So yeah, it's quite fun.
It is a lot of fun, but not so much when you accidentally write yourself into a corner. And then you're
Yeah,
like,
that's not so fun.
So I did, in Silverblood, obviously Lucan's father is murdered and he's got to figure out. And I was like, it's cool, I'll work that out later. And then at some point you actually have to figure out, how does that play into the whole thing, and who did it and why did they do it? And if you then suddenly having to maneuver within a certain framework that you've already built, and this is probably why you should plan before writing, but I didn't, and so that was fun trying to untangle those knots.
So at that point, you generally get the good idea. You're like, oh, this would be so much better if, and then you have to delete 3 chapters.
That's what the editor questions are like. Why did they do this? And you're like, I don't know. I don't know. Like, do I have to answer that? And they're like, yeah, you need to know why. I'm like, That's why she has the like job of doing that, and I'm like, oh God, I have to. She's actually the sadist that tortures me, right? Yeah.
I think actually it's so interesting you say that, because I think maybe it's just me, but quite often I do things, I'm like, why did I do that? I don't even know. And I enjoyed very much that, like, your characters sort of have a noble purpose, but some of your characters slightly feel like they're making their own lives hard. I mean, I guess they all are in some way. Do you find that that kind of people making mistakes in your books and the kind of chaos coming from that is something you're interested in writing?
That's the heart of the story, isn't it?
Yeah.
People make mistakes all the time, even if they have the best of intentions.
People are messy.
People are messy, absolutely.
Yeah, I think for me, I sort of grew up reading so many of these 90s epic fantasies about farm boys who became heroes, and I love them, and and still have a sort of a fond spot for them. But the trouble is, so many of these characters are like, they're quite boring, actually. Like, more there's so much more you can do with a character who is broken and maybe not the best person at least when you first meet them, and then their whole trajectory can be them trying to become a bit better, and that there's a lot you can do with that. And I just find also those kind of characters a lot more believable, because most of us are a bit messed up in some ways, and we've all made poor choices, and that have informed big events in our lives. And having a character who is trying to work through that, I think, is a lot more relatable than someone who just gets given a magic sword and then told to go off and do something. Like, most of us aren't given a magic sword. We have to kind of muddle through anyway. So.
Most of them are purer than pure as well. Except they'll hack their way through 100 guards and then spare the villain at the end.
Yeah.
That guy had a family. He was just told to guard a door,
I think
that's a more interesting story to me, that guard's life, than that hero.
So true. I mean, the humanity, the relatability is the cognitive dissonance. How many of us are like, oh, we believe one thing, but we totally do something different. And your friends are like calling you out, and you're like, yeah, that totally wasn't me. But you you don't want to admit it, but you're like, yeah, you totally know that I shouldn't have done that, but I said, fuck it, I'm sorry. I said, I'm going to do it anyway. And, that cognitive dissonance, everybody has that. And it just makes it more, like human in a way, and more relatable and compelling, because you're like, oh, I'm like that. I am just as chaotic as that. great.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think it's really interesting you bring up the kind of that sort of epic fantasy chosen hero because all of your books actually have much more of an ensemble cast than that, rather than having the kind of one lone hero who's going to save the world. Um, and I guess I'd like to know what's interesting to you about having that kind of wider cast of characters and how they work together to solve the problems that you've set them.
I think like Paracelestial, I don't know, like there is a cast in there like a found family, but like Lady Jing is very much the underdog. Like she is I am not a chosen one. I don't want to be a chosen one, you know, like her foster father is like, you need to rise up to your title, you need to behave like, you know, a noble, you have like all this stuff that's like in your favor, like why don't you, like what is it, Aragon? Like stand up to your name. And she's just like, no, I'm not going to. I don't want to. And she runs off and does her own thing. And I think there's value in that. I think there's value in saying, you know what, I'm going to carve my own path. I don't want to take on that mantle. And like using your found family to be your sounding board is like why not like build your community? And I think like nowadays, I think that's so important. You know, we are so much like, you know, scrolling on our phones and online. It's a very kind of, it can be very solitary. So like having that found family is like really important.
I think for me, I think having an ensemble cast means you can just explore different worldviews and also have characters bounce off each other. So Lucan is an aristocrat. He's grown up in a very privileged world. But then you have Flea, who's a scrappy street urchin who grew up on the streets and has a completely different worldview and a completely different experience. And then the third character, Ashura, was born kind of roughly middle class and then has kind of fallen into poverty. So she sort of straddles both worlds and is also mixed race and so has two different cultures as well. So taking those three characters who all have different worldviews and different backgrounds just means throwing them together raises all kinds of interesting questions. And it was something that I had to think very carefully about with the second book, because the first book is like, it's just, you know, bam, 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 one thing after the other. And there's too much going on for them to really think much about what do I think about this person, or how, you know, do I agree with their particular worldview? And there's a little bit of friction, but things are happening too fast to really delve into that. Whereas with the second book, I had to really stop and think, okay, these characters now are spending a lot of time together. They are going to be finding things they disagree on. So where is the tension in their relationships? How does that play out? How does it inform their individual arcs? That's not necessarily something that comes naturally to me as a writer, so I had to think really hard about it, and you know, hopefully I've done a good job of it. But that's where I think it was really, even though I found it challenging, it was very rewarding for me, you know, thinking about these relationships and the different worldviews and how they would sort of bump off each other. That was really fun for me as a writer to experiment with all that. And I think that's what I enjoy about the ensemble nature of it.
Thank you.
I think my ensemble is quite different from yours. In mine, all the wizards start as, they're quite downtrodden, they're tired, they're dispirited. It's a horrible war-torn world. And science is a collaborative process. Through an accident, they come up with this mad idea to build a rocket to the moon. And as these things kind of do, you need help. So they have to recruit other people into their little cabal. And in doing so, they find hope and a goal that's not building weapons of mass destruction. So in this, it's all about, you know, finding your people and doing some mad science.
Some mad science. Can we go back to the idea of found families? Because it really struck me that I think all of the books, there are a lot of protagonists who have problems with or challenges with their blood family. And then they're kind of, these teams come together, they're adventuring, and they kind of increasingly become like family to each other. Was that something that you really wanted to explore? And what does it say about kind of relationships for you?
Well, I think for me, these are the family they would choose. These are the people that share the same goals, the same interests. So they're interested in magic, they're interested in the world, and they're interested in very much not dying. Thank you very much. Yeah, I've always believed that a found family is an incredibly strong thing. Because you don't have to be with these people. You're not stuck with these people. These are the people you want to spend time with. I think that's a really lovely thing to write about. especially when it's in like a horrible world and everyone's against you, and that's a really powerful dynamic when you have to stick together and come through it.
Yeah, like I grew up in Canada and I moved over here in my late 20s. So, my family's over there and the family I have here is found family, like people that I've chosen, that I've, feel very close to, and they are essentially my network here, my family, my support. And it's nice to explore that in stories as well. And also like in Paris Celestial specifically, it's pitting the family because she was an orphan and she's always wanted family and her maternal family has always rejected her. So when she finds her vampire family and they're kind of like accepting of her, like that sort of draw is so strong, and you pit that against your found family that is a really strong relationship as well, like that loyalty, that conflict. It was really fun to go through that and be like, okay, how is she going to deal with this? She wants it so bad, but she loves these people. They really care about her, and that, I think that's creates tension. It's quite juicy. You torment your characters and torment your readers, see how they feel. But yeah, I think that's there's so much to mine, and especially family conflict. Like, who doesn't have like really difficult, strange people in your family, and you're just like, oh my God, the drama. And like to have that in book form is just like, it's safe. It's much safer to explore than having to deal with it, in Thanksgiving or Christmas or weddings.
Yeah, so this is kind of a confession, but I was halfway through writing Blackfire Blade when I realized I'd kind of screwed up and given both Lucan and Asher the same kind of backstory. They both, so Lucan's father is murdered, obviously, and it was only halfway through writing this when I was like, oh, wait a minute, Asher's father was also murdered, like, in strange circumstances. So I don't quite know how I accidentally gave them the same kind of, family history, which seems ridiculous, and even thinking about it now, I'm not quite sure how that happened, but so I went through a brief phase where I was like, oh, this is terrible. I've really, but then I thought, well, it's kind of locked in now. It's in book one, and book one's already out there, and I can't change it now. So I'm going to have to roll with it and find a way to kind of like make it look like this was deliberate. But so that was something that I leaned into, and it was the fact that they did have this shared experience. But I leaned into the fact that Lucan has the chance to actually get to the bottom of what happened in his, with his one, whereas for Asher, it's just kind of, it feels like a done deal, and there's nothing more she can do about it. And so I lent into that element in their relationship, and that formed, like, I think one of the best scenes between the two of them in the book, where they're talking about these experiences that kind of unite them, but the different ways in which they are approaching it. And that became kind of a foundation stone for their relationship. And I think you can form very strong bonds with people that you've been through an experience with, particularly when it's a really grueling experience. And I think that's something that brought them closer together as characters. And so that's how I was able to lean into it and make it look like I actually meant it when I didn't. But I just think, as Alice said and Cameron said, it's these kind of the dynamics of family and the drama that comes with it, I think, is a really rich theme to mine. So it's probably why it crops up quite a lot in fantasy books.
Yeah, I think that's probably very true. And I know for you, Alice, that there's something about sort of belonging and identity that you like to write about as well. And I think that comes across really strongly with Paris Celestial. And I just wanted, if you wanted to tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure. So, for example, Shanghai Immortal was set in 1930 Shanghai, which is treaty port, and the idea, it was written during pandemic where you had a lot of anti-Asian racism happening. The whole what did they call it? Anyway, whatever. Like some kind of derogatory thing about Chinese. Oh yeah, Kung Flu. That was it. I was like, nice. In Shanghai, in treaty port Shanghai in 1930s. It was run by foreign concessions. The British concession was run under British law, the French concession under French law. So you could be Chinese living in China, in Shanghai, but you were an outsider. Like you weren't subject to your own country's laws. You were like subject to foreign laws. And like as an immigrant, as a minority, visible minority, sometimes that is a feeling you get. And I think anybody who has grown up and moved away, come back, or moved to a place that is new, being an outsider, being a new person, that's not always, there's always friction there. And so like that idea of belonging is something that I'm very curious and interested in. Like I look Chinese, I've lived in China. In China, I'm a foreigner, because they're like, oh, you're not, you're like a, what do they call, Chao, which is like overseas Chinese. And they know, they can tell, because culturally we're different. Even like in terms of fashion, how you move, it's different because of your, what do they call it? Hardware looks the same, software and operating system, not the same. You know, it depends on where it's nature versus nurture, right? You're nurtured, the operating system is nurture. So that's always really interesting to me, where it's like, who decides that you're an outsider? Who decides you belong? How do you carve a space for yourself that is a shape for you and just you? And I think that's like something that you have to decide for yourself. And that's something like I like to explore in the books. Like, at what point do you stop letting other people decide for you, and that you decide that for yourself and claim a space?
Yeah, I think that comes across really strongly. And then in both your books, of course, your main characters, their status has changed. So, Logan is no longer aristocratic, still doesn't have that place in the world. And Ella has, is no longer a sky mage, and she's had this life-changing injury. She's now disabled. How is exploring those kind of changes of status and how you now belong in the world kind of coming through in your books?
I mean, it's an interesting question. I suppose I kind of needed to have a main character who was quite educated, because I think that it was just kind of important to the plot and the way the world is revealed, but also I guess the opportunities that are open to someone of that status, perhaps. It kind of made it a necessity, but it's fun having someone from that background who has lost it, who then is in a different environment, but has kind of learned has sort of found their feet in that environment, but isn't always necessarily regarded particularly favorably by people who were already in that environment. So I guess it's just a way of thinking how would this inform his decisions, what mistakes would he make, where is the tension coming from, from his various actions and how they're being received in these kind of spaces. Again, it's just about thinking and finding ways to kind of create tension and then mine that to create the sort of the big events in the book. Yeah.
Yeah, so Ella was a sky mage. She flew sky ships for the Unity, spying on the enemy. And there's a horrific accident, and she crash lands on a hierarch's golden carriage, completely destroys it, and is sentenced to the production lines. So all day, every day, she uses all of her magic to make weapons. And then she goes home, sleeps, and comes back and does it every day. And she's at rock bottom. She's heavily in debt to afford her wheelchair. And then she gets this one chance, just through pure accident. And she seizes it, and she goes for that. And what I wanted to explore with Ella was someone coming up from rock bottom and just seizing her chance to make a life for herself again. That was the core of that character for me. And I thought it was just a really interesting story that I wanted to tell.
And quite a different life than she had before, but still a good life eventually.
I think it's
a
also
different life.
quite interesting in the sense of having to rebuild yourself and get back to where you were. I think also forces you to look at things in a different way, or maybe see something for the first time. And I think with Luke and his particular journey, he loses what he has. He's thinking, how do I get it back? But then there's also part of him that's thinking more and more, do I actually want to get it back? Because he sees that life that he had from the outside now and realizes how privileged it was and how terrible it turned all of those, what those people became that were in it. And he thinks, actually, I don't want to be like that anymore. And, I'm kind of horrified that I was once like that. So is this kind of like push-pull thing, like I kind of want it back, but also not like it was? But can I have it back but different, and it forms part of the journey, I suppose, yeah.
And the only constant is change.
Yeah, yeah.
And do you embrace that, or do you keep trying to get back this thing you cannot get back?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wondered as well, like, sort of talking about these constructs and these hierarchies, literally in your book, hierarchies that the characters find themselves in, of power and diplomacy and manners and control, that all of the protagonists struggle to fit into, and they either kind of consciously act against them or they just feel like outsiders. And I wondered, it might not be the case, but I wondered whether or not you were consciously setting out to kind of talk about power and how it affects us, or whether that pressure shapes your characters in some way.
Oh, totally. Like, Lady Jing is somebody who absolutely pushes against societal expectations, particularly as a woman. Like, as a Chinese lady, a Chinese deity. I push against the expectation that she should be, graceful and delicate, in Taipan, the lady who's, you expect the Chinese ladies to be demure and submissive and la-di-la-di-da, not like talking about farts and being like a potty mouth and not caring if you shake your legs or show your butt. She's like, everybody's naked, what's your problem? And I really like that as a woman as well, like pushing against those expectations. Like I grew up with those, from a relatively conservative family. Most Chinese girls are told, don't do this, don't do that. If you do that, that's so too like vulgar, crass. And I'm like, why? Like, no. So I think that's really nice to be able to model behavior that's like, okay, actually, she can be, well, she's quite messy, but I think deep down she's quite good in that she's kind of chaotic. Maybe chaotic good, chaotic neutral. She's not chaotic evil, but it's dicey sometimes. But that you don't have to be a terrible person if you don't conform to those expectations. And I think she's usually quite reasonable. Like, why should I? Why should I be worried about showing my legs? You guys do it. Like, plus you want me to run. How am I supposed to run if I can't move my legs? And I think that's reasonable. And I think there's a lot of expectations that are put on women, or generally how people should behave, that sometimes you're like, really? Really? I don't know. I don't think that's right. So yeah, that was definitely deliberate.
Yeah, I think for me it was deliberate as well, but more at the end. I started writing Silver Blood in 2015 and then finished around 2021 or something. It was quite a long process. As I said earlier, I had no idea what I was doing, which is why it took so long. But I think the world in 2021 is very different to 2015. And, need I say it, like Brexit, Trump first term, pandemic, and so it's almost, you don't really, even though you're in a room on your own in front of a screen making imaginary people do horrible things to each other, it's impossible not to be influenced by the outside world. And I think all of that stuff that you're seeing playing out in real time, so abuses of power, politicians lying, powerful men being terrified of any other, like wanting to forge the world into their image and being terrified of any other version of it. That's all happening. You can see it happening. It's still happening now, and it's inevitable that kind of plays in. And I think in the end, I realized that I was doing it, and hadn't even realized I was doing it. And at some point, I realized that, this is happening in the book, and I need to lean into it and make it like a deliberate thing, because it's something that I set out to write a kind of action adventure book that is just a good time, but that doesn't mean you can't explore serious themes at the same time and kind of actually look at those kind of abuses of power and cast judgment on that. I think it's important to do so.
Very much the same thing for me. So this was written a couple of years ago, and in the last few years, you've had the horrendous politics, you've had wars, you've had all the oligarchs and billionaires and capitalism gone mad, and yeah, it become more and more relevant as the last 2 years come along, and I was like, oh man. Yes, it was absolutely deliberate. So the setting of the Unity is capitalism gone mad. So everything is run by the oligarchs, and everyone else are downtrodden pawns, corporate slaves, essentially, which, is getting that way now. So yeah, and there's always going to be rebels, though. And I wanted these characters to rebel against that structure, even though it might cost them their lives. But preferably not just now, until they can hide it and actually go there. So that was my goal with that, but it was absolutely deliberate.
And I think it made that commentary, all of them made that commentary really well and really made you kind of think, because they are a great time. Like, all three books are a really great adventure, but they, I think, speak to much deeper issues, as all the best literature does, of course.
So I was sitting thinking, okay, there's all this talk about how much a moon base costs. It's like, how much are we spending on war? What could we achieve if we didn't bomb all of these people and instead went do medical research and scientific research and engineering? And that's where that all came from.
What would we have if we actually taxed the super rich? A little bit, like even just 1% makes such a big difference, but we don't do that. It's like,
Okay. I think I have time for one more question, and then we'll come to audience questions. So this is just for fun. Looking at your protagonists, who do you think, out of your ensemble casts, would cope best if they were dropped into one of the other books to support that cast of characters achieve their goals? And who would just make the situation drastically worse?
I think for me, that'd be your book, James. I would drop the summoned imp in. He's an absolute masochist, as you know, these demons are. The more pain, the better. Yeah, so I think that would work quite well in yours.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think if I wanted to help, if it was like they need a character to help them, then I would put Ashra, because she's very thoughtful, very methodical, very clinical, and tends to make good choices. So I think she could just drop into either book and probably help things along in a positive way. If I wanted to mess it up completely, I'd throw Flea in, because she could start a fight in an empty room and will always say completely the wrong thing at the wrong time. So it'll cause chaos, and it won't get the right it won't get the right outcome, but it'll be a lot of fun to watch. So.
Yeah, I think Lady Jing would be terrible. She would mess everything up. She'd have loads of fun with your characters, but yeah, she'd be chaos. It would not be good.
That's the fun of books, isn't it? You get disaster character.
Yeah, she is disaster.
Hopefully you've got someone that's
Chaos.
half competent.
She's not competent, but you'll be entertained. I think the only competent person is probably, let me think. Gigi's very competent. She's like the daughter of the Jade Emperor, and she's like clever, and she's convincing, and she's an adult. But she'll probably drink you under the table. But she actually wouldn't ruin things.
Yeah, I think you definitely want Lady Jing on your works night out, but not necessarily in your team. Okay, thank you all so much. That's been really interesting. It's so nice to get to talk to you about these books that I've enjoyed reading. Do we have any questions from the audience? Do you want to start here?
Hey, thanks so much for the talk. I was wondering, once you've had your first draft, and you kind of get to the structural edit, what are the questions you're asking yourself to kind of decide what works and what needs to be changed?
Oh, that's so many questions.
one, yeah.
Okay, so it's not just a first draft. Zero draft, many drafts, and then you are like, okay, right. When you're ready, at least this is for me. When I'm ready to revise, I will hopefully have some time to put it away. If I don't, that's fine. I try to read it on my Kindle or with a different font or something. And I read it the way I watch movies. So, when you watch a movie, it's very easy to know, oh my gosh, there's a huge plot hole. Why didn't they fly in with the eagles in the first place, right? You kind of are like, oh, you have this overarching distance where you can see the story, and you're like, that doesn't make any sense. That person is like, what? But when you can do that with your own story, there's so many questions. It's kind of like, oh, that doesn't make sense. You note it down. The pacing here is really slow. Note that down. This is totally illogical. Note that down. And then kind of do multiple passes to try to figure out, well, first, step back. Why doesn't it work? How do you fix it? That's the big question. And then if I fix it, did I mess something up? So it's like a big, I feel like there's many pieces that you kind of try to analyze. And then when you analyzed it and thought enough and think you have it fixed, then I make notes and go through it and then see if that actually fixes it. And if I'm lucky, then I will then rewrite stuff and be like, okay, right, I'm going to write this fix and stuff. But it's kind of it's a long process, and it's multiple iterations. I don't know, if you guys have an easier way, please tell me. Please.
I mean, I think
yeah, you're an editor, tell me.
Well, this is it, yeah.
What's the big secret?
Hopefully the author's already done most of the hard work before it gets to me, but yeah.
Did you do it?
Did I what?
Did you do the work before you got to editing?
Yeah, I mean...
Or did you
yeah,
engage editor
The
mode
hot
and go, why
seat,
did
oh
I
my
do
gosh.
that?
I think I did. I've definitely been on the end of manuscripts that could have done with another pass before they came to me, but, you just have to take what you get. But, yeah, I mean, no, I agree with... every author, every writer has their own kind of craft and way of working. So you ask that question of 10 authors, and you'll get 10 different answers. But, yeah, I think Silverblood's kind of an outlier because it took me so long to write in multiple drafts, so I don't think I really had my process down, whereas with Blackfire, I very much kind of had my process down. So for me, it's first draft is basically just get the story down, don't worry about, I know parts of it don't work, I know I'll have to change things, I know that that character disappears halfway through and then someone else randomly appears without warning. That's fine, you just make a note and kind of, move on. So just get the shape of it down. Then for me, the second pass is when I address all those points that I've noted as being problematic, but I'll also look really closely at character and arcs and plot holes and just the plot hole together and pacing and stuff like that. And once I've got to the end of the second draft, that's the point at which I'll be looking to submit it to my beta readers and to my editor, and then get that feedback on board. And then the third pass is me taking on board all that feedback and doing any final tweaks of my own. So yeah, Blackfire was about 3 passes, which was definitely a lot less chaotic than the first book. So
I think mine's much the same as yourself. I think part of it for me is there's a bit of a writing advice, which is sometimes taken out of context, and it's called Kill Your Darlings. And for me, this came up when I was writing Maleficent 7. I wrote this really kick-ass tavern fight scene, and then my editor turned around and went, could you not just replace this whole chapter with one sentence of what happens? I was like, I hate when editors write.
Yeah.
And they usually are, and you're like, yes, I could. Ugh. So, and the story worked better doing that. And I think you have to read your own work and going, what if I did this, and what if I was not there? And just question yourself.
Yeah. I think a question I always have in mind is, even on like a sentence basis, it's like, is this moving the story forward? Is it developing the world, or is it developing the character? If it's not doing one of those 3 things, like, does it need to be here? Probably not.
If it's just because you enjoy it.
If it's just because you think it's cool, it's like, it's not always enough, is it? And and the other question I have in my head that I'm asking myself all the time is this as exciting as I can make it? Is there another level I can push the scene to? Is it
just functional?
Is
or
it just
could
functional, or like, and I find as an editor, putting my other hat on, one of the comments I leave so much of the time on my author's manuscripts is, this is good, but it can be more exciting. You can mine this a little bit more. Like, how far can you push it to just get it to that extra level? So, yeah.
Thanks. Great question. Great answers. Anybody else got anything? Over at the back?
We have a question from the live stream. Do the authors have any real-life Chaos Goblin acquaintances, friends or family who inspired any part of their story? It's tying back to earlier in the discussion.
In both of my books, there are grandmas who are problematic. Let's just leave it there.
I think for myself, I took a lot of inspiration from the space race, 1950s, 1960s, and some of the mad stuff they did in that. So I guess I took a lot of inspiration from the madness of that chaotic time.
I don't think I do, actually. I don't think they have. I do have 1 or 2 friends in real life who are pretty chaotic, but I don't think they directly influenced the book in any way. So,
Okay. No. Best not to name names.
Yeah,
anyway.
no names.
We are being
They know
live
your
streamed.
names. They know
so,
they are. They know they are. They would agree.
Does anybody else have a question for our authors? Anybody? Sure.
Oh, sure.
Why not? I have some more questions. Don't worry. I have lots of questions.
No,
you
no,
go.
go
No,
ahead,
you
go
first.
ahead, go
Absolutely.
I wanted to ask, with Paracelestial specifically, you mentioned you were doing a lot of research into 1930s France, and obviously in Germany you've got the rise of the Nazis at the time. And I was wondering how that, because I don't know much about how that impacted France, and how, or to what extent that played into your book, or whether you decided it wasn't something that fit within your story.
I don't really deal with that in there. In the 30s, basically the gay 1920s, where everybody's there and having a great time. By 1935, everything is much like most of the Americans have left. They've all actually, lots of them went to Spain to fight the war. The economy wasn't doing so well because the American dollar had tanked. So it just wasn't as vibrant or exciting, or it wasn't such a glamorous time. So there is that, but there are still a lot of artists there. So I didn't deal with the Germans. It doesn't really come into the story. I thought about setting it in England, and I was like, oh, 1935 England is just not, yeah, it was really grim. So I was like, okay, maybe not. Yeah, so I did the research, and I was like, I can do this. I can look at like where things are and how things were. And there's like a few mentions of what was happening like in 1840s, 1850s in Paris, because they're vampires, live forever, right? They're like, oh, I couldn't leave in 1845 because there was some trouble. And like, you know, they did have some problems, but it's very light mention.
Thank you. Okay, so what do you find hardest to write? Humor, suspense, or thrilling action? And which do you enjoy most?
Oh,
I thought these were easy questions.
Yeah, that's all right.
I enjoy all of those.
We discussed the questions beforehand.
I think for me it would be humour, because humour can be quite subjective.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, I end up just writing to amuse myself. If it amuses me, I think I've done well, and
Yeah.
hopefully other people like it.
I'm the exact same. I'm like, okay, I have a strange sense of humor, but if I'm enjoying it, I hope that there are readers who like it too. And if not, then maybe they just won't find it funny, but maybe they'll find it like compelling and still read because the pacing's good.
Yeah, I think you just have to trust yourself in that. If you think something is funny enough or whatever, enough other people will as well. Like, and I suppose for these books, like I'm sort of writing them for myself in a way. Like I think that's the easiest, particularly when you're starting out as a writer. I think it's the whole kind of like write what you want to read kind of thing. Or I very much wrote the kind of book that I really enjoy kind of reading, and the kind of thing that as an editor I wanted to see landing in my inbox. So I just think that whenever you're doing it, if it's a like humorous scene or whatever, I think you just have to trust that if you think it's good enough, there'll be enough like-minded people out there that also share your kind of sense of humor. I think I do have a very particular sense of humor as well, to the point where my editor in Blackfire, actually, my editor asked me to suggest that I take one of the kind of jokes out, and I was like, no, because you might not like it, but I do. I think it's funny, and hopefully some other people will share that kind of sense of humor. But I don't know.
Tell us which joke?
Yeah. Sorry.
Which joke?
Oh, it's not even a joke. It's I don't want to say because I think it will ruin it if I say. But I can I'll tell you afterwards. But I don't know. I really enjoy writing action sequences, and I think that I'm probably reasonably good at them. The humor I enjoy a lot, and like obviously that's like take it or leave it. Depends whether you share my sense of humor. Suspense, I don't know. That's something that I think maybe I'm not even aware I'm doing it necessarily. Like it's just something that I think instinctively you get better at as you develop as a writer. I think what I find difficult, actually, I touched on this earlier. With Blackfire in particular, doing those kind of relations, thinking about the emotional arcs, and when I submitted the draft of Blackfire, the main comment I got back from my editor was, "What is this character doing in this book? Why is she there? What's the point of her?" And so I had to think about that and how she relates to the other two and how they bounce off each other and where everyone is emotionally, because there wasn't really time to do that in the first book. And I found that really hard because I think as writers we all have different things in our toolbox. And while I like to think of myself as like an emotionally intelligent person, it's one thing to be one, and it's another thing to actually know how to hit those emotional beats in a work of fiction. I found that really super hard, and I think what I take away from the second book that I wrote is knowing that I can do it, and I've learned how to do it and how to structure that. And so I'm still learning as a writer, and even my third book now, which fortunately has been a lot easier to write than the previous two, but I'm still learning stuff about the craft, about how I approach it, about how to write a book. I think you're always learning how to do it, and so that's what I found hard with the second book anyway. Yeah.
Thanks so much.
My worst thing is pacing. And that's why I'm so grateful for an editor, because I'm like, oh, I really enjoyed this bit. I want to write all about it. And she's like, nobody cares. Like, a friend of mine was like, oh, I researched how to make Greek cheese in ancient Greece and had a whole scene about it. And she had to cut it because they're like, no one cares. I'm like, oh no, I care. I want to read about it. But yeah, the pacing is like.
The rabbit holes of research.
It is.
It's fascinating, but.
Yeah, you're
Doesn't
like,
need to
does
be there.
anybody else care? Yeah.
Is it important to know it even if it doesn't make it into the
Oh, you
book?
can't get it wrong.
Can't get it
No.
wrong. So you've got to know about the ancient Greek cheese.
Horses are the ones that people complain about the most.
Horses?
If you get horse wrong,
How do you get horse wrong?
you chase it like a motorbike.
Okay.
Yeah. Various other things. People will complain. To your face.
What's the,
really?
have you had many horse-related complaints?
No, because I got it right.
Because you get the horses right. You get the horses right every time. Okay, do we have any last questions? We've got another one from the live stream.
This question is for Cameron specifically. How easy or difficult was it for you to get agents interested in such a hyper-violent story as The Traitor God?
That was very difficult. I was originally submitting to agents back when Grimdark was a much bigger thing. So it would be much, much harder nowadays. So we had
Maybe now, though, people are really into
It's- everything comes
necromancy
down.
and like all sorts
Yeah.
of weird things with dead people.
Yeah.
You heard it here first.
Yeah.
I think it helps when you're submitting and things, when you say, it's not just grim, death, horrible, but you include that you've got people trying to do some good, like especially humor, black humor in Grimdark, I really enjoy. So I specifically mentioned things like that. So after quite a few rejections and quite a few just nothing, tumbleweeds, I got a few bites. And one of the agents I submitted to, I ended up going to a convention with. So I was sitting there talking to my friend Stephen Aryan. He's like, "Oh, who have you submitted to?" And I was like, "Oh, such and such, such and such." He's like, "Oh, right. So have you read it yet?" And I'm just, oh dear. But it doesn't get you picked up, but you're no longer just a faceless name. So that helped me get read faster. And that person did become my agent at the time. So there was a personal connection there as well.
Amazing. Okay, thank you all so much for coming. There will be a signing afterwards. To get to the signing, you go back out here, down the stairs, and turn left, go to the bookshop, and go up the stairs. Do come and see other things in Chimera. It's on for the rest of tonight. And all day tomorrow, you can go to the Creators Hall, which is back open tomorrow, see lots of brilliant events. They have a raffle, they have merchandise. It's an amazing festival. And please join me in thanking A.Y. Chao, James Logan, and Cameron Jones.
And Emma Collins.